never planned to tell anyone about this. What happened in that cavern was supposed to stay buried, sealed off with the others. But lately, I've been dreaming again. I hear the pages turning the whisper of voices that know my name. And I think the library remembers me. What you're about to hear is my full account, the official recording from Project CAVERN-9. If you're listening to this, it's already too late. Because once you hear the library, it hears you too. This is the story of the door to the Library of Sins. And I swear to you, every word is true. They said the recordings were destroyed after the incident. But I found one in an encrypted drive labeled CAVERN-9, restricted, mod internal. That's what you're about to hear. And if you're smart, you'll stop listening before the end. My name is Dr. Michael Baird, geological consultant for the Ministry of Defense, and I was part of the expedition that discovered the door. No one ever told us where the coordinates came from, just that we were to descend into an uncharted cavern system somewhere in Devon, England. From the start, nothing felt right. The rock layers below the surface were older than the crust itself, impossible according to every geological record. Yet the instruments insisted we were going down and down, almost a kilometer beneath where solid granite should have ended. That's where we found it, a 2-story slab of copper embedded seamlessly into the cavern wall. It wasn't attached. It was grown there like the earth had formed around it deliberately. Its surface was carved with thousands of human figures, thin screaming, reaching upwards, as if trying to escape the metal itself. Every one of them was looking back over their shoulder, terrified of something unseen just behind them. The details were wrong, anatomically wrong. Some had too many joints. Others had mouths where their eyes should have been. And the longer you looked, the more they seemed to move, but only when you weren't looking directly. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see that door, and I swear, sometimes it's breathing. One of the soldiers with us, Corporal Davies, said he heard whispers when he got too close. Another man vomited when he touched the copper. They told us it was a mineral resonance reaction. But I saw the fear in the commander's face. He didn't believe that, not for a second. 5 days later, they brought explosives. They didn't tell us why, only that the door must be opened. I should have walked away then. Every instinct I had screamed to leave it buried. But curiosity is a stronger poison than fear. When the charges blew, the entire cavern shook. Dust filled the air like smoke. And then, silence. We approached the hole where the door had been. The copper was gone, torn from the rock like a piece of rotten flesh. And behind it was a dark corridor lined with stone. A dry, hot wind flowed out. The temperature rose instantly, and yet there was no source of heat, no lava, no magma vent, just air that had been waiting too long. I remember thinking something strange, something I didn't dare say aloud. This feels right. It felt like we hadn't opened the door at all. It felt like it had been waiting for us to find it. That was the beginning of CAVERN-9, and it should have been the end of me. When the dust cleared, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No echo from our boots, no drip of water, just stillness, thick and absolute. The opening gaped before us, an unnatural wound in the rock. It wasn't carved by tools or erosion. The stone looked melted, as if it had recoiled from whatever lay inside. The air smelled dry and old, not like decay, but like time itself had stopped breathing. It pressed against my lungs, made me lightheaded, and for a moment, I thought I heard something faint in the distance. like pages turning. We moved in a single file, headlamps slicing through the dark. Behind us, the blast team packed their gear in silence. No one joked, no one spoke. Even the soldiers had gone pale. I remember the first 10 steps vividly because each one felt heavier than the last, like the air itself resisted us. When I looked back, the entrance was gone. There was no light, just the sense that something had already closed behind us. The passage sloped downward. The deeper we went, the more the walls changed. The raw stone became smooth, almost polished, etched with strange geometric grooves that glowed faintly when our lamps passed over them. Symbols, spirals, lines that seemed to shimmer when I wasn't looking directly. Dr. Grant, our linguist, said they resembled Proto-Canaanite mixed with early Latin. That shouldn't have been possible. He laughed nervously when he said it, but his hands were shaking. About 50 meters in the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, and that's when we saw it. A library, not a ruin, not a natural formation. A library carved directly into the bedrock. Bookshelves rose from the floor to the unseen ceiling, stacked in impossible rows that curved upward like ribs of a colossal beast. Every shelf was packed tight with books, leather, parchment, even things that looked like pressed bark. Some of them shimmered as if the ink was still wet. It was hot but not suffocating. The air vibrated faintly like the hum of distant machinery or a heartbeat buried deep in the stone. We spread out our lamps, cutting cones of dust and light through the dark. Davies muttered, "Who built this?" No one answered. The only sound was our own breathing and the faint whisper of paper shifting in unseen drafts. I don't remember who picked up the first book. Maybe it was Dr. Ashling. It was thin, bound in something that looked like skin. The letters inside shimmered faintly, crawling on the page before fading into stillness again. Grant said, "It's a catalog." Then he frowned. "No, a confession." He didn't explain, and I didn't ask. There was something about the way the shelves leaned, the way the shadows pooled between them, that made it feel like the whole place was listening. Every time someone coughed, the echo came back slower, like the sound had to pass through something alive. When I touched one of the spines, the book was warm, not from the air from within. And for a split second, I felt something pulse under my fingers. That was when I knew we hadn't found a relic. We had entered something's body. Grant whispered almost to himself, "This is older than language." And in that moment, I realized I was afraid not of dying, but of what we'd already woken up. We camped near the entrance that night. No one slept. The shelves creaked softly in the dark, as though something inside them was breathing. When I finally did drift off, I dreamed of hands pressing through the copper door, reaching outward, and one of them was mine. We descended further the next morning. No one said it aloud, but we were afraid to go back. The tunnel behind us seemed smaller now, as if the stone had closed in during the night. When we tested our radios, the signal barely carried 20 meters. Static answered everything beyond that. Still, we pressed on. The deeper we went, the more the shelves multiplied, not just along the walls, but forming corridors, bridges, spirals that rose into blackness. Every passage looked the same. Dust lay thick on the floor, and our footprints vanished within minutes, as though the ground itself healed. I started marking chalk arrows on the walls, but even those faded, the white turning gray, then gone entirely. After an hour, I realized we had stopped talking altogether. Our voices felt intrusive. Each sound came back, warped, stretched thin, echoing just a second too long. Grant carried a recorder to document our findings, but when we played it back, there were extra breaths. 6 of us entered that place. The playback always had 7. Dr. Ashling was the first to say it. Maybe this isn't a library. She said the books didn't feel right in her hands, that every time she touched one, she saw flashes of people she didn't know, a child crying in the dark, a woman screaming through a window, a man digging with his bare hands. Grant told her it was stress. But later, I caught him staring at a spine with his own name burned into it. We kept moving, following the cables we'd laid behind us, our lifeline to the surface. At one point, I thought I saw a light flicker between the shelves ahead, as if someone else had brought a lantern. We called out, but there was no response. When we reached the spot, the dust on the ground was disturbed, a trail of footprints leading deeper, smaller than ours, barefoot. I felt something shift inside me, then a cold realization that we weren't explorers anymore. We were being led. Hours passed. The air grew warmer. The light from our lamps bent strangely, bending around the edges of the shelves, as if gravity didn't quite obey the same rules here. Books sagged and creaked, spilling loose pages that fluttered across the ground and dissolved before touching it. Eventually, the corridor opened into an immense mezzanine that overlooked a chasm without a visible bottom. Across that impossible gulf were more shelves, levels stacked upon levels, each with their own faint light, glowing like dying embers. It was infinite, an ocean of words and dust and silence. For the first time since entering, I felt something like awe, then terror, as I realized that the faint lights across the abyss were moving. We couldn't tell if they were people or something else. But they walked along the bridges, carrying books, stopping occasionally to stare across at us before fading back into the dark. We camped again, anchored to a section of railing that overlooked the void. I remember sitting there, watching the lights, and whispering to myself, "Who are they?" "Davies," one of the soldiers said quietly. "Maybe they're us." When I turned to look at him, he was staring into the black eyes, unfocused, breathing slow, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. None of us slept that night. The lights across the abyss kept moving closer, slower, like they were crossing toward us, one by one. By morning, they were gone. But the air was hotter now, and every shelf seemed to lean just slightly inward, like the whole place was closing in to listen. That's when I started hearing the whispers for the first time. They weren't words, just faint murmurs, like ink drying on paper. But I could tell one thing for certain: they were saying our names. We broke camp at what we guessed was morning, though there was no sun down there, only a dim golden haze that seemed to come from the rock itself. I remember the air tasting like copper, metallic, dry, ancient. Grant grew restless. He'd stopped talking to us, stopped eating. He carried a book now, one he refused to put down. At first, I thought it was a journal, something he was using to record his findings. But the paper was too thin, too fragile, like it had been soaked and dried 100 times. When I asked him what he'd found, he just smiled. "It's mine," he said. "All of this is mine." We didn't know what that meant. Not yet. Ashling tried to pry the book away from him later that day. He screamed a raw animal sound and nearly hit her. That's when I noticed the veins bulging in his temples, the way his pupils had dilated, until there was almost no white left in his eyes. He kept mumbling something in a language I didn't recognize. At first I thought it was Latin, but the longer I listened, the more it sounded like words trying to become Latin-twisted echoes of languages long dead. When we finally convinced him to rest, he fell asleep, clutching that book like a child with a toy. I should have taken it then. God, I should have taken it. We continued deeper. The passages began to change, narrower, now more angular, as if the architecture itself was shifting to trap us. The cable line still ran behind us, humming faintly with the power from the surface, but it no longer pointed straight back. When we tugged on it, it moved as though the tunnel behind us had rearranged. We came to a fork, 3 paths, all identical. I marked the one we came from with chalk, just like before. When I looked back moments later, the mark was gone. Something about the place was rewriting itself. Around what we thought was midday, Grant woke up. He was smiling. His lips were cracked, his teeth bleeding. "Do you want to know what it says?" he asked. My book Aisling and I exchanged a glance. "What does it say, Grant?" He opened the cover. The pages were blackened ink, so dark it looked wet. "It's every sin I've ever committed," he said, "and every one I ever will." He turned the book toward me. I expected blank pages madness, something symbolic. But there was writing. In English, it listed names, dates, locations, things no one could have known, things Grant couldn't have remembered. I saw my name dated for a day that hadn't happened yet. The entry read, "Baird abandons them in the dark." I couldn't breathe. I slammed the book shut and stepped back, but the words burned behind my eyes as if I'd memorized them against my will. Grant laughed. "It's all here," he said. "All of us. Every one of us. There's a book for each soul that ever lived." He gestured around at the shelves. Every thought, every act, every secret, written in the sinner's own tongue. Aisling snapped at him, said he was talking nonsense, but he only smiled wider, pointing at the spines. "Don't you see? These are our confessions. Every language, every age. Some not yet spoken." Then his voice dropped, almost tender. I found the last page of mine. He held it out toward me. There were only 3 words, the final sin. Before we could stop him, he laughed a sound of pure joy and ran towards the mezzanine's edge. For one terrible second, he turned back, eyes blazing with a kind of divine madness. "Don't follow me," he said. "You'll understand when you read yours." Then he leapt. The sound his body made when it vanished into the abyss wasn't an echo. It was applause, hundreds of hands clapping in the dark, growing louder until it became the beating of a single monstrous heart. And then, silence. No one spoke for a long time. Aisling was shaking. The soldiers whispered to each other in low voices. I stared at the spot where he'd jumped, waiting for some sign of him, a scream, a light, anything. But there was nothing. When we finally turned to leave, I noticed something on the shelf behind where Grant had been sitting. A new book. Its spine was blank, but still warm. When I brushed the dust away, I saw my name pressed faintly into the cover. I didn't open it. Not yet. We didn't speak Grant's name again after that. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it, that something inside the cavern had noticed us now. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was attention. The kind you feel when you're being studied, not watched. We decided to head back. The logical choice, the sane one. But logic doesn't survive long down there. We followed the cable line, our tether to the surface, retracing our steps exactly. Except, nothing looked familiar. The shelves were tighter together, the air hotter, and the dust on the floor had vanished completely. Even the chalk marks I'd made were gone again. We walked for hours, though our compasses spun aimlessly. The metal needles jittered like they were afraid to choose a direction. Aisling swore under her breath, voice trembling. "This is wrong. This isn't where we came from." Davies tugged on the communication wire. "If it's still connected, HQ should be reading us," he said. "They'll pull us out." He was right in theory. But when we tried the radio, all we got was static. Then beneath the noise, a faint sound, not voices exactly, but breathing. I snatched the receiver and yelled into it. "Command, this is Dr. Baird. Do you copy?" The breath hitched, then stopped. And a voice answered, faint and distant. It sounded like mine. "Keep going." The line went dead. We reached another fork, 3 passageways again, identical as before. Aisling pointed to the middle one. "That's the direction the wire runs. It must lead back." But Lieutenant Michael, the older soldier, shook his head. "No. The compass says north is that way." He pointed to the left corridor. Then I noticed something else, faint scratches on the floor. Boot marks. Our boot marks. But they led into the middle passage, not out of it. That's when the argument started. Davies wanted to follow the wire. Michael said the compass. Aisling looked to me like I had the answer, but I didn't. The longer we stood there, the hotter the air became. It wasn't natural heat. It was oppressive choking, like we were inside a furnace that had no fire. And behind it all, I swore I heard something moving deep in the shelves, like paper dragging across stone. Finally, I made the call. "We follow the wire," I said. "It's our only physical connection. A compass can be tricked. Metal can't lie." Michael didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "Fine. But if it loops us again, we turn around." We pressed on. The corridor tightened until we had to walk single file. The books here were old or warped, fused into the rock, their covers cracked like dried skin. Some had no titles at all, only imprints of faces stretched across the leather. Every few minutes, one of them would sigh softly, like it was dreaming. After an hour, Davies stopped abruptly and raised a hand. "Do you hear that?" We froze. At first, I thought it was the creak of the shelves again. But then I realized it was voices. Faint, layered whispers, hundreds of them chanting something rhythmic and low. We couldn't make out the words, only the cadence, like a heartbeat made of human breath. The sound grew louder as we moved, and that's when we saw the light. A faint glow ahead, golden and warm. For a moment, it looked like daylight salvation, maybe an exit. But the closer we got, the clearer it became that it wasn't sunlight. It was fire. We reached a small chamber, circular, lined with burnt shelves. Every book there had been blackened to ash. And in the center was a figure seated, motionless, back turned to us. Aisling whispered Grant. The figure didn't move. Its head lolled to the side skin. Gray clothes melted into the stone beneath it. The smell hit a second later, burnt meat and ink. But the worst part wasn't the body. It was the book it held open in its lap, still unburnt. Its pages glowed faintly from within, and the words shifted like worms. I leaned in just long enough to read one line. "You shouldn't have come back." Then the pages turned on their own, faster and faster, until they caught fire and disintegrated in front of us. The light went out, and the darkness moved. We ran. For the first time, we didn't care which way. We ran until our lungs burned, and the sound of the whispering faded behind us. Only when we finally stopped did we realize the wire had vanished. Not snapped. Vanished. Aisling looked at me, tears glinting in her light. But now I didn't have an answer. I looked back at the empty tunnel where the wire should have been. It was gone, and yet I could still hear it, humming faintly, like it was embedded under my skin. I said the only thing I could. We keep moving. But I knew deep down that we were no longer trying to find a way out. The library had already decided where we were going. We walked for what felt like days. None of us spoke anymore. Talking seemed pointless. Every word was swallowed by the air before it reached the end of a sentence. The deeper we went, the less the place looked like stone. The walls pulsed faintly, like there was something beneath the surface breathing. At some point, we stopped checking our watches. Time didn't work here. The tunnel split again, but this time only one path seemed open. The others had collapsed, or maybe had never been there at all. The books were different now too. They weren't bound with thread or leather, but with sinew, wet, fresh. The pages were slick. When Aisling brushed one with her hand, it left a dark smear across her palm. She didn't say anything, just wiped it on her sleeve and kept walking. Then we began to hear the whispers again. Not the chanting something softer closer. It sounded like voices pressed right against the walls, murmuring through cracks we couldn't see. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they wept, sometimes they said our names. Davies muttered, "This place isn't dead. It's remembering us." No one answered him. We reached a door. It was small, barely wide enough for one person. Unlike the others, this one wasn't carved from stone or metal. It was made of something grey, dry, and uneven. When I shone my light on it, I realized what it was. Skin. Someone or something had stretched it thin and nailed it into the rock, hundreds of layers thick, until it became a solid sheet. At its center was a simple handle, bone white and worn smooth. Michael stared at it for a long time, then finally gripped the handle. "Either we go forward," he said, "or we die standing here." The door opened easily, too easily. The smell hit us, first rot and ash, and something chemical, like old blood. Then came the sound, whispering. Thousands of overlapping voices, all speaking at once, too fast to understand. And then, as our lights swept the room, the whispers stopped. There were shelves here too, but not filled with books. Each row held a neat line of human heads, desiccated grey lips, cracked eyes, white and unseeing. Hundreds of them perfectly aligned, their mouths slightly open, as if mid-breath. Aisling screamed. Her voice echoed endlessly in that chamber, bouncing from skull to skull, until it became something inhuman. Davies lifted his rifle, his hands shaking. Jesus Christ. Are they the nearest head twitched? Its eyes rolled upward, cloudy and wet. Then it spoke. A faint rasp, airless and cold, still reading. And suddenly, they all began to move lips, fluttering teeth, clicking 1,000 whispers, merging into one unbearable drone. Michael shouted for us to fall back, but the door behind us was gone. Only more shelves stretching out into the dark. I don't know what possessed me, but I stepped closer to one of the heads. It followed me, with its milky eyes, lips trembling. I crouched down and whispered, "What are you?" It blinked once, twice, like it understood. Then it mouthed a single word, "Witness." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a fallen shelf. Davies shouted something, I didn't catch it, and fired into the rows. The gunshot cracked through the air, deafening, and then silence. All the heads stopped moving. Every single one turned to look at him. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. They just stared. Then, all at once, they began to laugh. It started as a whisper, then built into a wave, dry throats, rasping in unison, mouths splitting, wider jaws creaking. It wasn't human laughter. It was the sound of things imitating what they thought joy should feel like. Aisling screamed again and covered her ears. Michael grabbed her and pulled her back. "Run!" he shouted. We stumbled down the nearest corridor, the laughter following us, echoing through the walls like a living tide. We didn't stop running until we reached another dead end. The corridor terminated in a wall made of red brick, new, clean, almost modern. It looked absurdly out of place. Davies dropped his pack, gasping. "That's impossible. There were no bricks here before." Michael slammed his hands against it, solid. He pounded again and again, yelling, but there was no echo. This time, the sound just died. Then the bricks began to shift, not crumble, move, grinding slowly forward, the mortar stretching like flesh. We backed away. The wall bulged outward, each brick pushing forward, fusing into a single surface that rippled like muscle. Aisling whispered, "Oh God, it's breathing." The bulge grew, pressing toward us. When the first crack appeared, a sound like a sigh filled the air. Hot wind rushed from between the seams, carrying the smell of decay and something else, something alive. Michael shouted for us to move, but there was nowhere to go. Behind us, the laughter had returned, softer, now mocking. The wall convulsed again, and I realized what it was doing. It wasn't closing in. It was coming for us. Davies fired again, uselessly, bullets sinking into the pulsing brick like stones into clay. Aisling fell to her knees, sobbing. Michael grabbed my shoulder, his voice hoarse. "Find another way. There has to be." The wall surged forward. It hit Davies first. I heard bones snap, his scream cut short. The wall rolled over him like an ocean wave, dragging him down, crushing him into silence. For a moment, I saw his hand, reaching out from the red mass, twitching, once then gone. I don't remember running, but suddenly, I was on my feet, dragging Aisling down another corridor, while Michael covered our retreat. The wall followed us, slow, relentless, a grinding roar, filling every inch of air. I could feel it behind me, even when we turned corners, even when we climbed the steps. It shouldn't have been there. It was alive, and it was hungry. When we finally stopped gasping and half blind, the laughter was gone, so was the wall. The corridor ahead stretched endlessly again, silent and empty. Michael stared into the dark, shaking his head. "It moved us," he said. "We didn't escape. It moved us somewhere else." I didn't argue. He was right. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, almost sweet. Aisling whispered, "Where's Davies?" No one answered. But I knew somehow that he hadn't just died. He'd been kept, absorbed into whatever this place truly was. And somewhere in one of those countless shelves, I was certain there was now another book, one bound in skin, still warm, with his name burned into the cover. We didn't realize at first that we'd stopped breathing. That silence after the wall retreated. It was so complete, it felt like the air itself had frozen. Aisling leaned against the stone, whispering, "Please let this be over." Her voice sounded small, like a prayer whispered to something that would never listen. Michael checked his rifle, even though we all knew bullets didn't matter here. His hands shook, not from fear but exhaustion, the kind that eats through your bones and leaves you hollow. We moved forward again, one slow step at a time. The corridor ahead sloped downward, narrowing into a throat of stone. The smell changed first. No more blood or dust, just damp, like soil freshly turned. There was a sound too, beneath the crunch of our boots, a faint, dragging something heavy sliding across the floor just beyond the dark. When we reached the next chamber, the light from our lamps fell away into an impossible depth. The walls pulsed faintly, and thin strands of something pale dangled from above like roots. They moved when the air moved. Michael whispered, "It's breathing again." And then, very quietly, "No, it's listening." We saw the first arm a few seconds later. It slid slowly from between two shelves, a long, pale thing with too many joints, too smooth to be human. It groped the air fingers, twitching nails, clicking softly like glass tapping glass. Then another appeared, and another. They came in pairs at first, then in clusters writhing out of the walls like worms from the earth. Each one ended in a hand, dozens of them, hundreds. Some big as my torso, others small as a child's. All reaching, all hungry. Aisling screamed and stumbled backward into me. "It's coming through." The arms stretched toward her, feeling the air, sensing the sound of her voice. One brushed her shoulder, and she convulsed like she'd been electrocuted. Her body went rigid. Her mouth opened, and she let out a sound that wasn't a scream. It was a recording of one. Perfectly replayed. Identical. Then she went limp, and the arms pulled her into the dark. Michael opened fire. The flashes of his rifle tore brief holes in the dark, revealing glimpses of something vast, pressing between the shelves. It wasn't walking, it flowed, pulling itself along with its arms, each one gripping and releasing the walls. The light hit its head for half a second. At least what I think was its head. It was made of hands. Hundreds of them fused together, fingers curled inward like teeth. When it moved, the fingers flexed and the nails scraped against each other, making a dry, chittering noise that filled my skull. Michael screamed, "Go run." I didn't move at first. I couldn't. That thing's eyes, if they were eyes, locked onto me. And in that instant, I felt it read me. It wasn't sight. It was memory. I saw flashes my mother's funeral. My first kiss, the night I cheated on my exam in university. Every lie, every thought I'd buried. It wasn't showing me my past. It was taking inventory. When I could move again, I turned and ran. The corridors were all wrong. Every path looped back to the same chamber, no matter which direction I took. Each time I returned, there was less light, less air. The thing was slower than before, but it didn't need to hurry. It filled every corner of that place like a spreading infection. I saw Michael again on my third loop. He was pinned to the wall, wrapped in arms, still alive, still struggling. His rifle lay at his feet, useless. He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot, his voice a strangled hiss. "Help me. Please, Baird. Shoot it." I took a step forward. One step. Then one of the hands on his chest reached out and beckoned me closer. That's when I ran. I left him. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran. His screams followed me for a while, short, choking, breaking apart into wet cracks. Then nothing. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours or days or years. The corridors blurred into one endless loop of shelves and whispers. I didn't feel the weight of my body anymore, just the rhythm of my heartbeat and the echo of my boots. At some point, I realized I wasn't alone. There was breathing beside me, ragged, shallow, but human. I turned my light and saw Aisling running too. She shouldn't have been there. Her skin was gray, her eyes empty, but she was running in perfect step with me. Every time I turned to look at her, her mouth moved silently. When I finally forced myself to listen, I heard my own voice coming from her lips. "Keep going." the same words I'd heard on the radio. Eventually, I stumbled through a gap in the shelves and fell hard onto stone. The ground was slick wet with something I didn't dare identify. When I lifted my head, I realized I was back at the mezzanine. The abyss yawned before me again, endless and black. Far below, faint lights flickered the same moving sparks we'd seen on our first night there. Only now I knew they weren't lanterns. They were eyes, thousands of them, watching, waiting. Behind me, the scraping sound returned the endless click of nails and bones. It was close. I could feel the air tremble as it dragged itself closer. I crawled to the edge, my flashlight slipping from my hand and tumbling down into the dark. Its beam vanished long before it hit the bottom. Then I felt a hand touch my shoulder light, almost gentle. I turned ready to face it. But it wasn't the creature. It was Michael, or what was left of him. His body was broken bent in ways no bones allow. His mouth moved, and for a moment, I thought he was trying to speak. Then I realized his jaw wasn't moving at all. The voices were coming from inside him, dozens of whispers murmuring from the hollow of his chest. When I looked down, I saw hands pushing out through his ribs, clawing gently at the air. He reached for me, slowly, pleadingly. And for one moment, I wanted to take his hand, to believe I could pull him back. But I didn't. I turned and I ran again. And as I ran, I heard him scream my name, not in anger, but in despair. Like he was begging me not to become what he already was. When I finally stopped, there was no pursuit. No arms, no whispers, no breathing, only silence. I was alone. I fell to my knees shaking, gasping, and for a long time, I didn't move. Then I realized where I was. The door. The copper door. It stood before me again, exactly as it had been the day we found it, untouched, sealed, perfect. Except now the carvings had changed. Among the thousands of screaming figures, one of them was looking straight at me. Its face was mine. I must have passed out. When I woke, the light was softer golden, almost warm, and the door was gone. In its place stood an open archway, carved into the stone, like a mouth waiting to swallow. Beyond it, the corridor glowed faintly, not with fire, but with something gentler. I should have run. I should have turned back into the dark and died there quietly. But I didn't, because a voice was calling my name. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It simply existed inside my head, calm and familiar, like I'd known it my entire life. "Come in, Dr. Baird." I stepped through the archway. The room beyond wasn't like the rest of the library. It was small, circular, lined with shelves, yes, but only 6 of them. Each shelf held a single book. The air smelled of parchment and something faintly sweet, like old flowers left in a coffin too long. At the center of the room stood a desk carved from black stone. Behind it, a man in a long robe sat quietly writing. His pen scratched softly on the page. He looked ordinary, old, maybe 60 clean-shaven, tired eyes behind small round glasses. When he looked up at me, he smiled. "Ah," he said, "you made it. I wanted to speak, but my voice wouldn't come." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, please. It's been some time since I've had a visitor." I hesitated. My legs moved anyway. When I sat, the stone chair adjusted itself to my shape like it was breathing beneath me. The man, if that's what he was, set his pen down and folded his hands. "You've seen my library," he said. "What did you think?" My mouth felt dry. "You built this build." He smiled faintly. "Not exactly. I organized it. Someone had to." He leaned back, studying me with a gentle, patient gaze. "This is a place of record, Doctor," Every thought, every lie, every secret. Nothing is lost here. Not really. I shook my head. You're saying this is hell he finished for me? Yes, in part. A forgotten annex of it, if we're being technical. No one visits anymore. He said it so casually, like an old man discussing a closed museum. Why me? I whispered. He looked genuinely puzzled. Why you? Because you opened the door. He gestured toward the wall. It was sealed for a reason, you know. Not to keep you out, but to keep what's inside accounted for. I didn't understand. My thoughts were a blur. You mean the creature? He chuckled softly. Ah, yes. The hand thing. A librarian of sorts. A collector who became too attached to his work. He used to help me, but after a few millennia, he started personalizing things. His voice was calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. You've met my archivists, he continued. The heads on the shelves, the wall that moves. They're what happens when order collapses into hunger. He sighed, tired. It's the same with every system, I suppose. I didn't know what to say. Every rational part of me screamed to disbelieve, but the room felt real, solid, ancient, final. I looked around at the 6 books on the shelves. Their titles shimmered faintly when I tried to read them, but one stood out. It had my name on it. He followed my gaze and smiled. Ah, yes, yours. I was wondering when you'd notice. Am I dead? I asked. He tilted his head. Not quite. You're between. Most people who come here are. He reached for my book, brushing dust from the cover. You've done quite well considering. Not many make it this far alive. He opened the book and glanced through the pages. His expression softened. Such a small life, he said. So many small sins. But one stands out, doesn't it? I swallowed. Leaving them. He smiled kindly. Yes. You're not the first coward to walk through my halls, Doctor. But you might be the first to admit it. That's rare. He closed the book and handed it to me. It was warm to the touch. Here, he said. It's yours now. Every record should belong to its author. I didn't take it. What happens if I read it? He looked at me almost amused. You already have. Something shifted then. The room darkened. The air grew heavy. When I looked down, the book was in my hands. I didn't remember taking it. The pages fluttered open to the last line. There were only 4 words. Return to the sender. The man stood adjusting his robe. It's time to go, he said softly. I'll see you again eventually. Before I could respond, he reached out and touched my forehead. His hand was cold, like the copper door. There was a flash of light, blinding, searing, and then everything fell away. I woke up screaming in a hospital bed. White walls feed drip nurses shouting. They told me I'd been found unconscious at the edge of a quarry 3 days after the cave-in. No one believed me when I tried to explain. They said there were no records of a Project CAVERN-9. No team, no coordinates, no grant, no Ashling, nothing. As far as they knew, I'd gone exploring alone and suffered a hallucination due to oxygen deprivation. But sometimes, late at night, when the room is quiet, I hear the sound of pages turning, and I swear I can smell dust and copper in the air. A few weeks ago, a nurse handed me an envelope. No sender, no return address. Inside was a single note written in a precise, familiar hand. 6 mortals entered. 5 were damaged in transit. Bodies repaired to the best of my ability. Minds, another matter entirely. Don't say I lack a sense of humor. At the bottom, in red ink, one final line, best wishes the archivist. I still dream of the library. Sometimes I hear Michael calling for me. Sometimes I see Ashling running beside me. mouthing my name in silence. But the worst nights are the ones where I see the desk again, the black stone, the 6 shelves, the man waiting patiently. And every time there's a new book on the shelf, its spine glows faintly, and I know, without ever opening it, that it's mine. They say I was the only one who made it out, but that's not true. The others are still there between the shelves and the whispers in the dark. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can almost hear them turning the pages. I used to think hell was fire and torment, but now I know better. Hell is memory. So if you ever find a door deep in the rock, carved with faces that look alive, don't open it. Don't read. Don't listen. Because the library is still growing, and somewhere in its endless halls, there's already a book with your name on it.